Hello, everyone, and welcome to part two in my uh, discussions and reflections on Cervantes's Don Quixote. Um, I should mention it is quite significant that we are reading, and I recommend you, if you're interested in reading this book, to get the translation done by Edith Grossman. I have read excerpts from other translations. This is this seems far superior to those, and the language is just so vibrant and so alive. Um, Thank you to everybody who responded and paid attention to my first video on Don Quixote, and in particular, I would like to thank my friends and um, interlocutors, Tyson, Mike, Sam, and Javier, who commented on the previous video. Um, I'm recording this second part to respond to two of those comments and to read a passage from Nabokov's lectures on Don Quixote, and see what else we um, we come up with. So the first comment that I would like to respond to was Mike's comment, Mike Gladman's, who is one of my friends, YouTube friends, and I also interviewed him on my channel. He very briefly refers to Don Quixote as a charming narrative or a story that has a lot of charming elements. And in general, perhaps it is a story that many people identify in terms of its charming qualities. And I can certainly relate to that. But at the same time, I see the charming qualities of Don Quixote as the tip of the iceberg. That's one response I have to that judgment of Don Quixote as charming. My second response is that at worst, the worst case scenario would be that we evaluate something as charming as a way of dismissing it and as a way of not taking it too seriously. So for me, although I do relate and I do find very charming and engaging qualities in Don Quixote, in the writing of this novel, but the charm is the tip of the iceberg. So, what is the rest of the iceberg? For me, the latent body of the iceberg, the rest, the massive, the mass that is, relatively speaking, hidden from that first impression, to me is the religious dimension of Don Quixote. And I mean, I'm not talking about any formal um, religious expression, um, anything that is officially connected to one of the organized official religions. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a more general religious sentiments. And I almost don't want to read Don Quixote in that way. This is something that some readers, myself included, some of us just can't shake off this, for lack of better term, the religious temperaments that we have, that we carry with us, which is a source of, sometimes it is a source of um, deep confusion, discomfort, pain, but also it can be a source of awe. And it's a way of, I don't want to generalize, I'm just talking about myself and readers like me who might connect to Don Quixote or to some other novels through this perspective, connect with it, connect with the text through this religious temperament. So what I mean by that, I think I find this Nabokov passage quite useful, where he talks about the religion of, or the religious side of Don Quixote's character, and how there's a center to that. There's a center to that way of religious stance in life in relation to his mission, in relation to the reason for his being and acting. So this is a beautiful passage from Nabokov. I hope that I do justice to it. So let's read. Quote, his composure, he's talking about Don Quixote, the character. His composure, his gravity, his beautifully calm demeanor and self control are oddly in contrast with his mad fits of belligerent rage. He loves silence and decorum. His choice of expressions is exquisitely careful without being mannered. He is a perfectionist, a purist. He cannot hear a churl mispronounce words or use a wrong expression. He is chaste, enamored with a veiled dream, persecuted by enchanters. And above all, he is a gallant gentleman, a man of infinite courage, a hero in the truest sense of the word. And then within parentheses, he writes, this important point should be kept in mind. He continues, although extremely courteous and ready to please, there is one thing that he will never stand, and that is any shadow of criticism of Dulcinea, his dream lady. So Lady Dulcinea of Toboso. Continuing, as his squire correctly marks, his attitude towards Dulcinea is religious. Don Quixote's thoughts never go beyond rendering her homage for her own sake, with no expectance of any reward other than being accepted as her champion. That, observes Sancho, is the kind of love I have heard the preachers say we ought to give to our Lord for himself alone without being moved by any hope of eternal glory or fear of hell. So, for himself alone, the kind of love that we give to a religious figure, a central figure for their own sake. So, why is it that Lady Dulcinea of Toboso is a religious center point, an anchor, a pivot for Don Quixote? She is imagined. She is not a concrete experience, an actual experience for Don Quixote, at least for the most part. She is imagined, while at the same time she provides a solid, stable point of reference that organizes him, organizes his decisions, his actions, his narrative, the way he recounts his decisions, his experiences, his justifications. So Dulcinea provides the justification, and she is a source of conviction. Another key quality of Lady Dulcinea is that she is absent and she is present in her absence. So her absence from view, her absence from immediate experience is part of what makes her significant for Don Quixote. So that was my long response to Mike, and my response to seeing Don Quixote as a kind of lovable idiot, which is definitely a valid way of reading, but it is, as I said, I see it as a dismissive reading that would engage, in my view, with the tip of the iceberg, which is Don Quixote's character. The rest of the iceberg, the depth, is present in that religious or semi-religious. No, let's just say religious. Why not? The next comment I would like to respond to was written by my friend Javier Rivera. And in Javier's judgment, Don Quixote is an instance of the child archetype. And that is a way of viewing Don Quixote, which is neither in the sense of a wise intellectual, a learned person, a book smart person. That was his, you could say, that was his origin. He was enamored with the life of a knight errant through reading books, through stories. So you could say he's primarily a learned individual, but Javier wants to say no. And he's not an insane person. So he's not insane. He is not a book smart intellectual. Um, and the third option that Javier suggests, I think it is definitely worth considering, is that he is childlike. He has a childlike innocence in the way he confronts the world, confronts reality. And I think um, we could consider that as the reason why Sancho has a soft spot for him. If Don Quixote is childlike, then Sancho Panza, his squire, has or in him what Don Quixote triggers in him. What Don Quixote triggers in Sancho Panza is a fatherly instinct, a protective instinct. He wants to protect Don Quixote. He wants to uh, stay around him and make sure that he's okay. Of course, on the outside, uh, the reason why Sancho is with Don Quixote, the reason why Sancho accompanies him, goes with him on adventures, is because Don Quixote gives him the promise of maybe one day I'll give you an insula. So that is, for me, that's key. And maybe I am now stretching. Maybe I'm speculating too much uh, with this reading of the insula. But I think for me, in my reading, it is significant that the promise given to Sancho is an insula. That one day he might be able to govern an insula once they emerge victoriously from battles, they gain the fortune and the riches as a consequence of victories. One of the things that Sancho might be able to gain is an island for himself. He will be the governor, ruler of an insula, an island. But the way I see it, by being with Don Quixote, Sancho already has his insula. He looks at Don Quixote and he says, wow, this man really is living in his own reality. He is really solidly standing and resisting the consensus reality, what everybody else believes in. He really has his own beliefs and he's very firm in those beliefs, like an island. You know, they say no man is an island, but Don Quixote is an island. He is an insula. And by being with Don Quixote, maybe someday Sancho can also be an insula. Maybe Sancho can also be an island, can also be similarly firm in his conviction, can be strong in his conviction and not be so malleable, so flexible, so influenced by the beliefs and um, expressions of other people. So, in that way, the promise of the insula uh, to Sancho, again, I admit this might be a stretch, but I find it plausible. A child, to go back to Javier's interpretation, a child really is an insula, isn't it? Isn't he or she? A child is kind of like an island. A child has, um, referring to Don Quixote as a child has his reality and a kind of childlike confidence in that reality. You know, childs don't buy everything that adults tell them. Um, if you look at, I recently look at that painting. There's a painting called "The Daughters of Edward Darley Boit." The Daughters of Edward Darley Boit. I believe the original is currently at a museum in Boston, and it's a painting by John Singer Sargent. So in this painting, we see the daughters of uh, Edward Boit. There are four young girls. The youngest girl, who is sitting on a carpet close to the bottom right corner of the painting. If you look at her face and her facial expression, the youngest child, the youngest daughter, she has the most assertive expression on her face. She has the most confidence in her reality. It's like she is really the most independent of the girls in terms of her relation to reality. She doesn't need to submit to the way other people interpret the state of affairs. So That is a childlike quality that we're talking about. I think that is a childlike quality that Javier is referring to when he talks about Don Quixote. That kind of independence, that kind of insularity, that kind of island-like, the ability to hold on firm to what the child believes. The child is not infinitely malleable, ignorant, neutral. The child is not none of those things. Not neutral, not malleable, not infinitely flexible, ignorant, just open and receptive to what the adults tell him. The child knows something, and because the child knows, the child can resist. So, in that sense, again, the child is like an insula or the governor of an insula. This is a point, a similar point to this, or the same point was made in the book Phenomenology by Sam Rocha. This is a prominent theme of saying something to the child, saying to the child, you are, a silly goose. And that's what Sam says in folk phenomenology. He tells a story of that, saying to his son, you are a silly goose. And his son resists that passionately as the governor of that insula. He resists and rejects, refuses that statement, that judgment, because the child knows something. At least the child knows that something is not the case. Okay, I think that is good for now. I can feel my throat starting to cough. I'm going to start coughing if I don't stop the video. And since nobody else is here at the moment, I think we can bring the live stream to a close. Thank you again for your attention. I would again recommend Don Quixote, but I would not recommend it in a sense that you should go out and read it, that you must read it. No, you really don't have to read it. And if you read it with the attitude that you don't have to read it. Read it with that attitude. Don't read it with the attitude that you are fulfilling a duty. And, in terms of going through the Western canon, in terms of debating the whole thing about whether or not Western canon is a useful concept or not, remember what I said in the previous video about Nabokov's lectures. In the beginning of the lecture, Nabokov begins with a kind of inside joke that you will get, that you would appreciate that inside joke only if you have read Don Quixote. And maybe reading the Western canon, the consequence of reading the Western canon is not something grand, something like devastatingly big. But maybe the benefit of reading the Western canon is the ability to get inside jokes like that, the ability to enjoy something very lighthearted, the ability to get together and very quickly say something that people who have read Don Quixote would enjoy, would find pleasing, and they find a connection through that. They find a human connection through that. Yeah, we have read Don Quixote, and we can laugh about the theme of enchantment with a brief reference. Okay, thanks for watching, and if you have any comments, again, feel free to share with me. Otherwise, I will speak with you in future videos.